He thought he could scare a young black man out of his own neighborhood. But what he didn't know, that man wasn't just another face. He was special forces, trained, armed, and not about to be pushed around. And when it all went down in front of half the block, the truth came out in the most explosive way. This isn't just a story about an HOA. It's about race, power, fear, and what happens when the wrong man pretends to be the law. And when I tell you how it ended, you'll see why this moment didn't just shake one family, it shook that whole neighborhood. Marcus and his wife, Tamika, had been looking for peace. After years of moving from rental to rental while Marcus was still active duty, they finally decided it was time to settle down. Marcus was 29, lean, sharp, disciplined, a man who had seen war zones but wanted nothing more than to grill on weekends and maybe start a family. Tamika was 27, bubbly, warm, the type of woman who would introduce herself to every neighbor with a plate of cookies. When they first drove into the gated community just outside Houston, it looked perfect. Wide lawns, manicured hedges, quiet streets where kids played basketball in driveways. Tamika's eyes lit up. "This is it," she whispered. And at first it was peaceful. Some neighbors waved when they moved in. Some ignored them. That was fine, not everybody's friendly. But slowly little cracks started to show. One woman, watering her flowers, muttered under her breath as Marcus walked by. Another neighbor asked Tamika bluntly, "So, what do you two do? How can you afford a place like this?" Tamika brushed it off, but Marcus noticed. He noticed everything, because as a Special Forces veteran, awareness wasn't a choice, it was instinct. And then came Greg. Greg was in his mid-50s, stocky, pale skin already turning red from too much sun. He drove a black SUV with a magnetic sticker slapped on the side that read HOA Security. He wore a navy polo with HOA Patrol stitched in white, and on his hip, a black 9 pistol. The thing was, Greg wasn't a cop. He wasn't even hired by the HOA. He was just a man who took neighborhood watch to a dangerous new level. At first, it was small things. Greg knocking on doors about trash cans being left out. Greg driving slowly past Marcus's house 3 or 4 times a day. Greg stopping kids playing ball and telling them to wrap it up. But then came the first direct encounter. Marcus and Tamika were sitting on their porch one evening. The sun was setting. Marcus had a beer in hand, Tamika scrolling on her phone. That's when Greg's SUV rolled up. He stopped right in front of their yard, rolled his window down and called out, "Do you live here?" Marcus frowned. "Excuse me." Greg's eyes narrowed. "Do you live here? I haven't seen you around." Marcus stared at him, calm but firm. "Yeah, right here, that's my front door." Greg squinted like he didn't believe him. "Got any proof of that?" Tamika sat up. "Proof? He's sitting on his own porch." Greg smirked. "Just making sure. Don't want people wandering around where they don't belong." And then he drove off. After that night, things got worse. Greg would park near their driveway, pretending to check his phone. Marcus caught him taking pictures of his license plate. One morning, Tamika went out jogging, and Greg followed her with his SUV for 2 blocks before she turned around and ran home, shaken. Marcus tried to let it go. He had discipline. He told Tamika, "Don't worry, he's just trying to feel important." But deep down, he knew this was going to boil over. That day came one hot Saturday afternoon. Marcus had just returned from the gym. Sweat clung to his shirt, his duffel bag heavy on his shoulder. He parked his car, locked it, and started walking toward his house. That's when Greg's SUV screeched to a stop in the middle of the street. The door flew open. Greg stormed out, red-faced, barking. "Hey, you don't belong here." Marcus turned slowly, controlled. "Excuse me." Greg marched closer, hand already twitching toward his hip. "I've seen you hanging around cars, carrying bags, sneaking around. You don't live here." Marcus's voice was steady. I live right there, 218. He nodded toward his house. Greg didn't even look. His eyes were fixed on Marcus's skin, his bag, his presence. And then it happened. Greg pulled the gun. Imagine it, a quiet suburban street. Kids' bikes tipped over on the lawn, a dog barking from a backyard, curtains shifting as neighbors peeked from windows. And in the middle of it, Greg, red-faced, shaking, pointing a pistol straight at Marcus. "Drop the bag," he shouted, "hands where I can see them." Marcus froze for a split second, not from fear but calculation. Training kicked in. His mind scanned the angles, the distance, the neighbors in line of fire. Slowly, Marcus lowered the bag. Inside that bag wasn't just sweaty gym clothes. It was his concealed carry holster, his paperwork, and a folder he'd been meaning to put away, one that included his Special Forces badge. Marcus lifted his hand slightly, voice calm. "You're pointing a weapon at a homeowner. This is illegal." Greg's grip tightened. "Don't play with me. People like you don't live here." Marcus's jaw clenched. "People like me." Greg sneered. "Yeah, don't make me say it." Neighbors were frozen in place. A kid across the street dropped his basketball and bolted inside. A woman clutched her phone to her ear, whispering, "Yes, he's got a gun, hurry." And Marcus, he didn't flinch. His voice stayed calm, even as the barrel stayed locked on him. "You need to put that weapon down, right now." Greg laughed nervously. "Or what? You'll call the cops. I am the cop here." Marcus took a step forward, his posture changing, shoulders back, eyes locked, his voice steady but dangerous. "No, you're not. And you're aiming a gun at someone who's trained to take it from you in less than 3 seconds. For the first time, Greg's hand trembled, because the way Marcus said it, the way his body shifted, calm but coiled like a spring, Greg realized this wasn't someone he could scare. And just then, sirens wailed faintly in the distance. And if you think that was wild, wait until you hear what happened when the real police showed up. Click here, you won't believe it. The squad car screeched to a stop. 2 officers jumped out, weapons drawn, scanning the scene. Greg immediately lowered his gun, waving his arms like he was the victim. "Officers, over here, this man's trespassing." Marcus cut him off, calmly. "I live here. He just pulled a gun on me in front of my own house." The officers looked at Marcus. He was steady, hands open, voice measured. Then they looked at Greg, sweaty, panicked, still reaching for authority he didn't have. "Sir," one officer said sharply, "put your weapon on the ground." Greg sputtered. "What? No, I'm HOA security." The officer's voice turned hard. "That's not a badge, that's not law enforcement. Drop the gun now." Neighbors gathered, phones recording, whispers spreading like wildfire. Greg froze, then slowly placed the gun on the pavement. The officers separated them. One took Marcus's ID, the other questioned Greg. Marcus handed over his driver's license, his concealed carry permit, and then, without a word, his military ID. The officer scanned them, then nodded. "Everything checks out. He lives here." When the officer walked back to Greg, his voice carried across the street. "You pulled a weapon on a homeowner. You've been impersonating security. Do you realize how serious this is?" Greg's face drained of color. I was protecting the neighborhood." The officer shook his head. "Protecting? You nearly killed an innocent man." And just like that, Greg's power crumbled. Greg was cuffed and taken away. The charges: brandishing a weapon, impersonating an officer, and making terroristic threats. The HOA scrambled, putting out statements. "He was not an official employee. We do not condone his actions." Neighbors whispered in shame. Some came to Marcus's door days later with apologies. One woman even admitted, "We should have spoken up sooner." But Marcus, he stayed calm through it all. Not because he wasn't angry, but because he knew losing control could have cost him everything. He told Tamika later, "That man wasn't just pointing a gun at me. He was pointing it at every black man who ever moved into a place people thought he didn't belong. This wasn't just about one trigger-happy neighbor. It was about what happens when fear and prejudice mix with false power, and how close this country still is to tragedy, even in a quiet suburban street. So now I'll ask you, do you think Greg, the so-called HOA cop, went too far? Comment your thoughts below. Subscribe if you got value from this story.